To my mind, this is oral history in the making, and we have people to give us first-person accounts. This evening, we are privileged to have Richard Grieb, who is our incoming president, talk with us, and we have Schock, who was our errant president. He has been a president many years here at the club, and he's now our honorary president. They're going to tell us about their life while they were still living in Europe. Now, I know both of these gentlemen are quite capable of starting now and talking until Thursday, at least. Unfortunately, I'm not going to let them do that. And I've already alerted them. I'm going to give them half an hour, then I'll give them a 5-minute warning to wrap up wherever they are. Hopefully they've started school by that time. But wherever they are, they've got to wrap up in 5 minutes. I know it's frustrating for them to try to organize all of their notes in their heads so that they can give it to us and give us the essence of what they want to tell us about their life and about the social history of the countries they came from. And it's somewhat frustrating for us. All we're going to get out of this is an inkling, an idea, a beginning, a start. But both of these gentlemen are very approachable, and if you want to buy them a beer, I'm sure they would be happy to tell you the next chapter. So feel free at any time to talk with them. I'm going to start with Richard Grieb this evening, and I will turn over the microphone to him to tell us where he's from and to tell us about his early life, and before he came here, and maybe some, if he has time, of how the transition was to America. Richard.
Thank you, and good evening. You gave me the opportunity to research some of the stuff that I didn't know about where I came from, and there was a lot more than I expected. I was born in a region called Bessarabia. Bessarabia is an area between the two rivers in what is now Ukraine. The southern part is the Danube River, and the northern part is the Dniester. Bessarabia was under many different countries' control, depending who won the war. Starting in the 1500s, it was Moldavia. Later on in the 1800s, Russia took it over. It became Romania. In 1918, it became the Soviet Union. And after the war, it became Ukraine. And now it's back to Moldavia, so it's a big circle. Our forefathers in the 1800s, early 1800s, came from Germany, from different parts of Germany. Many came from Prussia, others came from Bavaria and Württemberg. I'm not sure where my forefathers came from, but the dialect that they spoke in our town was the Württemberg dialect. They left Germany because there was not enough land. They were usually the younger siblings that had to leave because the farms were too small to support everyone. And they left there to go to the east, just like many others went to America in those days. So they came to Bessarabia as a group of people. When they got there, it was just like coming to the United States. There was no housing. There was nothing except grassy land, no trees, no rocks, just flat land, very, very good farmland, but that's about all. Apparently there was a very bad winter, the first winter they got there, and many, many of them did not survive the first year. They built homesteads, they built houses out of mud and straw roofs. They were very, very small, and they were unique in that there were many different people living in the area that were not Germans. So there were German settlements just between Russian settlements and Romanian settlements, and then different cultures were all together, but they did not really live together. They all were separated, and they did not culturally get together, so that the Germans would not really associate with any other group. They stayed to themselves. The church, the Lutheran Church, was the binding factor. The Lutheran Church is the one that provided schools and provided teachers and provided ministers. They're the ones that actually were in charge of these colonies. Although they were not colonies, they were basically under the control of whoever owned the country at that time. They had nothing to do with Germany, yet they kept the German culture 100%. They spoke German, they kept the German churches, all of it being supported by them. It was not state supported. Whatever they did as far as the German cultures and schools, it was all supported by the church and by the people that lived there. As I said, the houses were very, very small, and they were basically just huts. They did not have wooden floors. They had dirt floors, and on Sundays they would come around and put white sand down so it would look nicer. One big room and a big oven in the middle of the place that served for cooking, for baking, for heating, and people actually slept on these big ovens. They had benches built around the ovens so that they actually slept in that same room. There were no trees in the area, so they didn't have any firewood. They were actually burning cow dung. They would dry it and burn it, along with the straw and the, I guess it was sort of a grass that they would put together, but the grass would burn too fast, so they mixed it. Apparently the life was a very, very hard life, and it didn't change. It really did not change very much in the 150 years that these people lived there. When I was born, there was still no electricity. There was no radios, no TV, no cars. Everything that was done the old-fashioned way. Very similar to the Pennsylvania Dutch, except that it wasn't intended to be that way. It was just the way they had to live. Just a little bit about my family. When my father was 10 years older than my mother. So when my father went to school, it was Russian. and he had to learn at least 1 hour of Russian per day. They brought Russian teachers in. 10 years later, my mom went to school, and she learned Romanian because the other guys took it over. My dad served in the Romanian Air Force. He was drafted and had to serve there. One of my grandfathers was very tall. He was about 6'5" or so, and he was a bodyguard to the Russian Tsar. They did not trust their own people to be the guards of the Tsar. They actually took Germans, and they had to be very tall, and they had to be selected, and he was one of them. What happened in the 150 so years that the people lived there is that they also ran out of land, so that they did build new colonies. For example, there was Arcis was the town that was the original town where my forefathers came from, and after they filled up used all the land, they built another town called Arcis that was New Arcis, and that was getting crowded too again. One thing that did happen is many of the people intermarried. They married their own relatives for 2 reasons. To keep the land in the family, but also because they didn't have any newcomers. It became a group of people that all were pretty well related. And there were a lot of people born with defects because of that. My mom always told me when I was born, she was in the field in the morning. It was in June. And she came home because she felt that she was going to give birth. They called a midwife. And in the afternoon I was born. In the house that they lived in, there were no doctors. Doctors were very far away. A lot of medicine was the home remedies that people had learned over the years, old-fashioned, and a lot of praying, and they were very religious people, and they felt that that helped, and maybe did. So these were German towns in the midst of Russia or Romania, in the midst of other towns, the neighbor town, being completely different, being completely isolated from each other. The reason I'm telling you this is, it always amazed me that for 150 years, these people were actually away from Germany, had very little to do with Germany. I guess letters and so on went back and forth, but really they were not part of it. Yet they kept their culture, they kept their language, they kept their own way of living. And after just a very few years coming to this country, lots of people forget where they came from, forget their language, never speak it again, tell you that, well, I came from Germany. How old were you? Well, I was in my 20s, but I forgot everything, so I really don't know how to speak it anymore. And these people were there for 150 years and kept it up. So this is one of the reasons that I come to this club, and that I believe that we have to do something about it, because I don't think it's a good idea to just completely forget about your past. Well, in August of 1939, the Russian government and the German government somehow got together, and it was called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. It was signed, where they annexed the area where we are from, Bessarabia. They just took it away from the Romanians and gave it to the Russians. And they annexed, the next step where we went to was Wartegau, which was in Poland. They just annexed all of Poland and gave it to the Germans, and it became Germany, part of Germany. So people in Bessarabia were given, the German people in Bessarabia were given a choice of being resettled in Germany, or they could stay. Well, a lot of the old people, a lot of people that didn't have anyone, stayed. And it wasn't very long, only months, before they were just about all killed, murdered, because there was a lot of hatred going on because of the war. So they did not fare very well. Most of them, 90% or so, left. And the way they left was they went to a port on the Danube River, and they were shipped by ship through Hungary into Austria, and actually was in Czechoslovakia, which at that point was also annexed. It was called the Sudetenland. And the people came up by boat, including myself, and we were put in camps in the Sudetenland until they decided where we were going to be resettled. It took about a year that we stayed in camps, in a camp, and that was in a town called Waldeck in the Sudetenland, and you have some maps that show coming up the Danube River and the Sudetenland. And then, well, just so happened one of my brothers was born there while they were in camp. So the point is that I had 6 brothers, and only 2 of us were born in the same country. All the others were born, this was actually Czechoslovakia, then I had 2 born in Poland, and 1 in Germany itself. So we were all different nationalities from the same family. What happened at that point was that these people were given land in the Wartegau, which was Poland. It was near the city of Poznan. What they did is they actually disowned the Polish people. The Polish people had very few small farms, and they just gave it to the Germans. My dad was given 7 separate farms that they put into one large farm, and the people that previously owned the land were given a chance to work for us. They didn't have to, but there was nothing else to do. From what I understand, many of these people were not treated very well because they weren't supposed to be treated very well according to government. You were slaves, basically, And they were only to be given so much food, and they were only to be given so much money, and you were actually against the state if you gave them more. My parents treated these people very well, and they worked very good for us. We were pretty rich in those days because of the land, and my mom usually worked in the fields so that we had a nanny that would take care of the kids, and she was Polish and she would not learn German. So we were sort of forced to learn Polish. And from what I understand, my older brother was pretty good at speaking Polish, but they always said that he was okay, but they thought that I was a little Polak because I spoke it perfectly. I having learned it at a young age, and but I did forget every word of it. I don't remember a word, so I guess you learn fast when you're young, but you also forget fast. The other thing is probably that when we did get to Germany, actually, it was almost a bad word to be called a Polak. You didn't want to be called a Polak. I mean, that caused a fight. So that's probably another reason why we forgot real fast. My brother Ernst and another brother Helmut, who died soon after birth, were both born there. Now, the Polish worked for us, but they also always said, just wait, we'll get it back someday. And it didn't take very long. We got there in 1941, and in 1945, in January, the German army came in and said, you guys have to leave for a few days because we're regrouping. In order to win the war, we have to regroup. So you guys have to leave for a little while and then we'll bring you back. Well, my parents certainly believed that because they didn't even take everything that we owned, including all our important papers and the pictures and my birth certificate and all the stuff that was important was left there because we were just leaving for a few days. Well, it turned out to be a little different than that. We never saw the place again, and in fact, our farm was burned down to the ground soon after we left. We found that out from our Polish friends. What happened in those days, again, my dad was actually, he was drafted in the army about 2 weeks before we had to leave Poland. They were drafting everyone. At that point, he was pretty old, and he had been drafted because farmers were exempt from going in the army because they needed to grow crops and so on. But at the last days of the war, they drafted kids, and they drafted old men, they drafted everybody, and they put them into a place called Volkssturm. That was a part of the army, and they didn't have uniforms for them anymore, not the proper uniforms. So they put my dad in an SS uniform, because that's all they had. And that was about the worst thing that you could have had on when you were seen by the Russians. And they just would kill you immediately if they knew you were in the SS. Well, he had some nice people that were in charge who believed that the war was just about over, and they just told them, get the hell out of here, find yourselves some civilian clothes and find your families. So what happened is, we had to leave. My mom never drove set of horses in our life. The Polish help that we had, one of the fellows that was in charge and had on the farm offered to go with us to help her until my dad would return. And he stayed with us for like 4 weeks. And when my dad finally did catch up with us again. It was, I believe, January 18th is when they made us move. The Watergau was very flat, completely flat land. Your wagons were built different, your horses were shoed different. Then if you go into an area where there are mountains, we didn't have brakes on our wagons, and they made us sort of get away from the Russians. Every time you turn around was, you know, we need to get away from the Russians. If you get caught by the Americans. So they took us southwest into the Erzgebirge, which are pretty good-sized mountains. And it snowed and rained, and basically the wagons were pushing the horses. Horses couldn't stop because they didn't have the proper shoes, and they were sliding down the mountains. I still remember many people dying. Many horses laying on the side of the road dead because they were run over by the wagons. And then the Russians were faster than us, and they came ahead of us. And they were very, very nasty with anybody. They stole, they raped, they killed. And that was because they were winning. My dad didn't catch up with us, and that's when the Polish help left and went home. But they didn't get anything of that land or the animals. The Russians had taken back everything, taken out everything, and burned the house. So we wound up in a place called French near Halle in Saxony. We stopped there. My youngest brother Gerhard was born there. And my dad just had an inclination that it was not a good place to live because the Russians it was the Russian zone. And since we lived in Bessarabia and at one time were Russians, he felt that they are not going to be letting us live there. They're going to want to take it back where he came from. And he didn't want that. So basically he spoke to some of these Russian soldiers that were guarding the borders. How about letting us get over to the Western Zone? And they said, sure, you can go. If you leave everything that you own here, you can go with what you can carry. So we still had our horses, wagon, and things, bedding and stuff like that. They gave it all to them in order for us to get across the border. So in 1946, we landed in a place called Friedland, which was another camp right on the western side. It's near Kassel or Göttingen. And we sat there for several months, many months, in huts, laying on straw, getting food whenever we could. And then we were assigned to different towns. You know, they just would take people and say, well, each town has to take so many, they call them flüchtlinge immigrants, or, you know, the ones from the east. And we were assigned to a place called Fürstenhagen, which was in Lower Saxony, Niedersachsen. And these farmers that they had their houses had to give up some of their rooms to take in people from the east. So that our family of 7 people, for the first 8 years, 6 years, lived in a 1-room apartment. 1 room, that means kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom, everything in 1 room. People that we lived with certainly didn't like it because the rooms were not apartment houses, they were their houses, and we were taking their rooms, and it was upstairs, and the houses were not built soundproof, so these 5 little kids, every time they made any kind of noise, they banged on the floor from downstairs with a broom. That means, you know, be quiet. And my mom worked for them, milking the cows, going out in the fields, just so that we could get milk for the little ones, and maybe a sandwich from them occasionally, or maybe some potatoes for the winter time. So we basically lived on potatoes and bread, and on Sundays sometimes we got, I remember going to the butcher to get a 1/4 pound of meat, a 1/4 pound for the family, and they would, my mom would take it first and boil it in soup to make soup out of it, and after that she would fry it and then divide it up so that we could get 2 meals out of this 1/4 pound of meat. My brother Gerhard, you see these movies on TV of people undernourished in Africa. That's how he looked, a big belly, bones sticking out everywhere. And one night my mom called the minister to come and emergency baptize him because she just didn't think he was going to make it through the night. So he was baptized because the belief was if you're not baptized, you're not going to go to heaven. So still religious with all that stuff.
5 minutes.
Okay. So basically, we stayed there for 10 years. We did get an apartment with 2 bedrooms the last 4 years. My dad never had a permanent job because he was a farmer, and basically he worked on street repairs during the summer and on welfare during the winter. My mother worked on the farm, and then we would go out and collect berries and take them to the city and sell them or trade them for something else. We would collect, I don't know what they are here, but they're like oil seeds that you would make oil out of. No. These trees only are supposed to have fruits every 7 years. Beech trees. And they were beech nuts that we would carry. But there was a miracle, I guess, because for 5 or 6 years after the war, these beech trees, every year they had fruits. Berries, blueberries, blackberries. We would go out early in the morning and bring buckets full home just so that we could trade them or sell them or make marmalade out of them. They would also go out in the fields after the farmers were done harvesting. We would go out and pick the rest of the grain that was dropped and left over. Same thing with potato fields. They would do it by machine, and often there were potatoes left on the ground, and we would dig them out, and they were ours. And I can say the parents live for their kids. The parents very often didn't eat just so the kids could have something to eat. So my father applied almost immediately to probably every country in the world that would take a person or an immigrant. The problem was he was over 5 kids that really couldn't work yet, and we didn't know anybody in the United States. We had no connections, so we couldn't get somebody to sponsor us. And it took 10 years. And actually, it happened because we came from Bessarabia and were at one time Russian citizens. There's a foundation called Tolstoy Foundation in New York. It's Elizabeth Tolstoy is the founder of it, and the granddaughter of the writer. And they were bringing Russians over, basically, that were persecuted by the Russian government because maybe they were helping Germany in the war, or they left Russia. So they were actually bringing these people over to get them away from the Russian government. And somehow we sort of qualified for the trip. Actually, we had to pay them back. They did pay for our trip over here. We came over on a Navy transport that was bringing American soldiers over there, and then on the way back, they brought people back. So for $1,000, they brought our whole family over here at that point, and we were able to pay Tolstoy Foundation back on that. If you were a Russian citizen, actually, they were bringing people over for free, and they were bringing them over to this farm, sponsoring them, and they really didn't have any work there. It was just a phony type of sponsorship, hoping that someone else would take them at the time, and then so that they can bring more people over. So we got there, and I had no idea. Everybody spoke Russian. They didn't speak English, they didn't speak German, they spoke Russian. And they expected us to speak Russian too, because we were brought over by them. So it did not work out very well for us. But my brother was sponsored by a fellow in Fall Grove, Pennsylvania. He was from Ulm, Ludwig Honnold, and he didn't know the whole family was coming, so when he did find out, he actually brought us down here and re-sponsored us, and we worked for him for many years. So that's how we got here. He actually rented us a house, sent a truck up for our belongings, and sent some cars up to bring the family down here. He had gotten some furniture from the Goodwill and furnished the house. And we got here with a completely furnished house, beds and everything else, a wonderful arrival. One other thing that was really amazing, and still is, our first friends, the first people that actually met us here, was a Jewish family. And the reason for that is because they speak German. So naturally, we couldn't speak any English, none of us could. So in order to get anything accomplished, we needed some help. And his family, Gabroy, the man was a doctor, and they had young kids, and they were just living down the street, sort of took us in and helped us out the first few months until we sort of got our feet.
Richard?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot more to be said, no doubt. However, when we get to the question and answer, ask him some more to finish up the story or to fill in some of the gaps, but I want to make sure we have some time for Simone, who has a similar story. It's going to be interesting to hear the two. They're so similar. And one of the other things that I want to do before we all leave here is to have you come and actually point on the maps where these places are. But after Simone finishes, you've got your map.
I got my map.
Okay. Simone, Schock.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. The only thing is, I gotta thank Richard, because there's only two things that I have to change. Because I went through the same thing he did. I was born in Odessa, which was at that time Russia. My grandparents were born there in Odessa, and they came, their forefather came from Württemberg, and my great-great-grandmother came from Berlin. And I grew up in Bavaria. You have to listen to it, you're a Prussian too, But Richard was fortunate, they left in 41 already.
40.
In 40. That's when Germans went into Russia. We left March the 12th, 1944, when the Germans were going out. We were the last ones to leave the Ukraines. And we came across the border in Bessarabia, right there in Ackerman, where they came from. So everything was there. Now I know why they looked at us Germans always kind of cross-eyed. They thought, they're going to do the same thing, because it's all I hear, but the Germans are no good. Because there was already a group going before us. Richard, that was you. We went up in Poland the same way. We went on the Donau with the barges for 2 weeks. Then we went on trains. We done the same, exactly the same that they did. Our homes at home were the same where my grandparents came from, my mother's side. When you talk about growing up in Russia, my grandparents on my mother's side, they lived there, were born there, lived to be 80s and died there, couldn't speak one word of Russian. They spoke nothing but German, because we had German churches, even universities. They had Germans there. No other ones there. The only thing was the strictest thing, religion. A Catholic boy couldn't marry a Lutheran girl, vice versa, even if they were Germans. That's why, like Richard said, there were so many that got intermarried. I don't think my wife knows it, but I'm going to tell, because I told my daughter-in-law yesterday, the day before yesterday, that my grandfather married his first cousin. So up till now, no, that has nothing to do, because my grandfather, he lost his father when he was 12. He had to raise the whole family. There was 2 girls and 3 boys. The 2 girls got smart. In 1890, they answered a letter from somebody from Shell that came from South Dakota. He says, I'm 21 and I think I'm in the age of getting married. I need a bride. So they talked her into go to South Dakota in 1890 to marry Shell. And we have relatives, they moved from Dakotas to Canada, so that's where we are. But like I said before, we've done the same track like Richard is. I cannot even change a word in it, because we went the same places, except 4 years later. But we went to the same thing. The only thing was, when the bombs were falling, we were 1 kilometer in front of it. So then I lost my parents for about 5 days, and I'm the only child, so I had nobody. Till we were reunited again. My parents and my grandfather, they were sent out to dig ditches for the German army so they can, hold on, but they couldn't. So we spent a lot of times on the road. Spent 1 week there, 2 weeks there, but we could never complain about being bad, because People in Poland treated us nice. Everywhere else, when we came to part of Austria a little bit, then we went out and went to Bavaria. We came to Thüringen, which was on Halle. That's where you were not far away from there. And that's when the Americans came in. And they said to us, we have a choice. Go back to the Russians or go with the Americans. My grandfather said, I lived 70 years in that country and I have enough of it. He says, I'm going home. So how we went up, where do you think the place was when we came to Germany, Bavaria? Dachau. First thing we're seeing is hammer and sickle over the camp. My mother laid in front of the truck so he couldn't go farther. She said, we will not go in there because you're going to send us back to Russia. So they said, no, we don't. The only one they sent back to Russia was my grandmother because she got sick. When they had a treaty to send so many people over back to Russia. But then we came to Bavaria, to Alpamogen, where we were settled in a home outside the town. And we had the best family that ever was in this world. They treated us as one of their own. I was like a child to them. They had one son which was 7 years older than I am. He's still my brother. If he got a pair of pants or a pair of shoes, Grandma bought the same thing for me. When they treated us, like he said, heartily, we had every Sunday, we had a chicken in our pot, which we grew up with a big chicken farm. Chicken and rabbits, that was all we had from 1946 to the 50s. And I learned my trade in Dachau. I am a cabinet maker and carpenter from trade. I was also sponsored, which is coincident again, from the Tolstoy Foundation. We tried to come over to the United States on the German quota because in my family there was no intermarriage. So automatically when the Germans came in, they made us German citizens. If we wanted to leave Germany to come to the United States, we couldn't because the quota for them was like 100 people a year. We had to wait 9 years. When we changed over to the Russian quota, it only took 4 weeks and we were over here. So,
talk more about your parents in Russia. They didn't live like you did. You lived in the city.
no, well, I can, like I said, she wants me to tell them how my parents lived. Well, they lived better than a lot of other people because they lived in a big city. My mother comes from a little village, but my father was born in Odessa. Well, my grandfather had a big business there. He was what they call, I don't know if you know what a makler is. He was a salesman. He was a mediator between the farmers and the business people in the city. He also was like a matchmaker. Because, you know, when he came in, they said, Simone, don't you know a boy that needs a girl or something, you know? Because I have 2 beautiful daughters, you know. My grandfather always says, well, then I have to match him up, you know. He says, and one time he matched 2 of them up. One was Catholic and the other one Lutheran. He said it didn't go over good. So, but we were in the city, and that's all my father always talked about, the opera, because Odessa has one of the nicest opera houses in the world. And that's all he was talking about, you know, music, but it didn't, I'm not musical. But I joined the Elvis Singer. But when we came out of Russia, I mean, that was Ukraine that time, but to me, was Russia, now they say I'm a Ukrainian. I says, no. I says, I was born in Russia as a German. I says, I'm stay a German. Because the reason is, my uncle was captured by the Americans. When they asked him, he said, you are a Russian. He says, no, I'm a German. He said, no, you're a Russian. He says, if you take a cow and put it in a horse's stable and the cow going to have a young one, what's it going to be? The guy said, it's going to be a cow. He said, well, thank you. was sitting here listening to Richard, and I said, well, he makes it very easy for me, because I don't have to go through the whole thing, because it's like a broken record. We slept in the same way when we got into, the only thing is, which he didn't go to Bulgaria. But we had to go to Bulgaria, because if you go through Romania, then you come to Bulgaria, and there's a little corner that we got on the Donau River. But they had them big stoves, and you had to crawl in the back of it overnight to stay warm. I mean, they were like, I would say, about 8 feet by 8 feet wide, you know, a big chimney in it. And, I mean, everything was smoothed out with clay and straw. That's how they make the floors. My mother always says, before the Saturday, when the boys came to visit, because my mom had 7 brothers, and they were all 7 in the German army. And she had 1 sister, but they had to clean the floor because the boys came over on Saturday night because they visited their brothers. I don't think they came for their brothers, they came for the 2 girls. But the same thing, heating, the same way they had the cow manure, the patches had to be done. We had no trees where we lived. That was Ukrainian. Now that was about, I would say about 110 or 120 kilometers away from Bessarabia. So you know that we both almost identical what their parents, his parents went through, so did mine. The only thing is, mine only had 1 child, they had 5. But we had a sick, my father was sick. When my father refused to go into the Russian army, he was sent to a prison. And in that prison, he got sick, so they had to take out 2 of his ribs in the back, and they gave him the wrong blood type. And since then, my father was epileptic. So, that's all I can make it short because I don't have to repeat what Richard said. So it makes it easier for you all to come with a question. I have a map here in front, and you can come here on every name that's on here you see is a German village around the Black Sea. There was almost 2 million Germans there. So you know why the Germans wanted them out, and the Russians wanted them out too, because they were afraid they would over to the other thing.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes.
How did you get here?
My Tolstoy family, they sponsored me too. But I was fortunate, I already had a job when I came here. My uncle lived here, but also a friend of mine. And I don't know if anybody knows Tony Moos right now in LA. He belonged to Zion Lutheran. And she got me a job where I did, like everybody that came here was Ukrainian, German, or Russian, had a job in Ludlow, in Edgemore, making ropes. That was before you guys came up there, then they closed Ludlow. Yes?
Have you returned at all, and if so, can you share your experience from going back to your homeland?
I was in Germany, yes, but I didn't go to Russia.
All the Russians in Germany were because of Catherine the Great, is that correct?
That's when they came over, yeah. Catherine the Great took them over because if you read the biography of Catherine the Great, she wanted to bring culture into the Russians. And that's how many Germans, and then again they had the big farms, the big steppes they had. You know, Ukraine, it was the wheat chamber of Europe. That's why our Führer went in there.
With all of the moving around, what was your schooling? Was there school?
Well, we had schooling about, I would say, about a half a year on the road, because when we came out of Bessarabia, there was a family that joined us. The grandmother was a teacher, and but she was a Russian teacher. So if you want to learn something, you had to learn Russian, which I could speak because I grew up with Russians, because I was 7.5 when we left home. My parents didn't want to send me to German school because it was too far to go, so they waited till I went 8, but by 7.5 we had to move out of the Ukrainians are Russian. So.
I have a,
To answer your question, I have not been back to Bessarabia, but my brother, who is 7 years older than I am, has gone back there twice. And he went with a group of people, all Bessarabian people. And in order to get there, you actually, well, first you have to fly the Russian Airlines to Moscow and then to Kiev. And then you're not supposed to go everywhere. You're only allowed to go to certain places where they want you to go. And they paid quite a bit of money to taxi drivers and so on to get them back. And there's so little left of what was there that most of the people did not recognize where they used to live. It is dirty, it is run down, the streets are not there, they're just dirt and mud places, and it has changed completely.
Anybody has questions?
As far as school, I was 16 or 17 years old when I came to West Germany, so I started in school a year late. I was in a two-room schoolhouse for the long time that we went to school. First, second, and third grade went in the afternoon. The other grades went in the morning. And they were, I guess it was third, fourth, and fifth grade were together, and sixth, seventh, and eighth grade were together, with one teacher in each of those. And he had to teach all three grades at the same time, so that they would give some guys work and the others he was working with. I don't know, I don't know how we learned, but we learned, and as far as I'm concerned, I was up to par when I came over here. I had finished 8th grade, and then I went to trade school, and then I came here, and all of a sudden they said, you have to go back to school, because you're only 16 years old. Well, I was already an electrician at that time, and I thought I was an adult. So I did go to night school and prep school, and basically, I don't want to brag, but it wasn't hard, and then I got real good grades, and I finished college. Eventually I went to college. I did go to school for the next 18 years after I got here. First to learn English, and then to make up the years that I didn't have in high school in order to get to college. And then I didn't go to college at night.
Richard, what year did you come over to this country? And did you leave out of Bremerhaven?
Yeah, we went in February 56, out of Bremerhaven. We went to Hamburg, and then we went from there to Bremerhaven. And I never forget the day. It was icy and cold, and the place was filled with ice. And I said, well, this is the last time I will ever see Germany again, because, you know, there were not that many airplanes at that time, and we just thought we had left the country forever.
What was the name of the ship that came over?
Not
General Langford.
See, she came
No
over same
kidding.
day, same boat. Well, I think you only had one boat, because everybody that came over that time came to the General Langford. I was fortunate because my grandfather was 80 years old now. Somebody gonna help me out. My grandfather came to the United States. My father came to the United States, and I came. Am I the third generation or the first generation? Because my grandfather was with me, my father was with me, and there's 3 Simons came over at the same time, but one of them was older. So is it now the third generation or is it the first generation? But it's going to be in about, let's see, 13 days. It's going to be 50 years that I'm in this country. I came February the 15th. So it's 16 days.
I got a year on
Yeah, I came in 1950, 7, and that was in February of 15. And if I would have came here by daytime, I would have turned around and went back again. Because I came down to Wilmington, down to the railroad station. And that time there was Bernard Shaw Company, I don't know if you know, they were right there on Lupton Street, and filthy and dirty, because next day my little cousin took me on a walk. When I came, I said, "Is that where we came in?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh my God." I said, "Where are we?" I couldn't believe it. I was ready to turn around and go. But like I said, I was fortunate. I had a job. And I came here on a Friday. On Monday, I went for a doctor's examination. And on Tuesday, I started to work. When I worked at Ludlow, there was a foreman who was German, Karl Nacker. And the waitress, the lady, the coffee lady came around with the coffee wagon. I was 20 years old. I found out when I came here that I wasn't allowed to drink beer. And he came around with a coffee wagon. She comes to me and she asked if I want something. I couldn't speak English, just a few words. So I went like this, with my finger, "Ein beer." And she says, "No beer." Okay. Next day she came, "What do you want?" "Ein beer." No beer. The third day she came and said, "No beer." I went right to the foreman. I said, "Look," I says, "I had enough." I says, "Every time that lady comes to me, she run out of beer." He said, "What did you say?" I said, "Every time she comes to me, she run out of beer." He said, "We're not allowed to have any beer in this country." I says, "Now you're telling me every time I get a beer." I said, But he thought I was funny because I said, "I don't know, every time she comes, she run out of beer." And in October of 57, I joined the Delaware Sangamon on a Saturday night, and I started to work Sunday, right the next Sunday, and never stopped. So in October will be 50 years that I'm a member of this club.
Drinking beer for 50 years.
No, a little bit longer.
When did you become a member, Richard?
I think Hans told me I've been a member for 35 years, but I'm not sure. I know my kids were small and I volunteered for German class on Sunday afternoons.
Richard, you said you were in a camp for a year. Could you tell us a little what that was like? Was that in a tent or what was that like?
No, they were, what do you call those huts, those Quonset huts. And basically they were just long huts with just straw on the ground, both sides, and you had to walk in between, and
No heat.
no heat, no, everybody slept together, families slept together, and, and some people put some blankets up in between, but, and every once in a while they would take us out and spray that, and then spray us with this white powder. I hated our white powder for lice, to get rid of the bugs and stuff like that, so they did that often. They just got you through there, take your clothes off, and just dumped it on you. That was basically it was a camp, but it was not a camp like you were imprisoned. It was just a place to live.
But there was no work to do, or?
Well, they made the adults work in the camp. There was no other work. No.
Make work, just make work.
Right.
I have a question about the towns you lived in while you were in the Russian area. Did they have a German name? Was there also another name that they were known by?
The map that you see a little bit of Bessarabian there, but there's no towns on except one, which was the capital where Richard comes from, and it's Ackermann, it's right here. But the ones that I have from Odessa, they have the German names and the Russian names on
So
them.
they were different names.
Yes.
But the ones that we lived in were in fact German established, and they never had a Russian or Romanian name. They actually were whatever they were named, that was it.
What about after the Germans left, were the towns
But that's
within?
completely different than, they just changed everything.
But,
Yeah.
but the
So it
names,
would be hard to go back and find them.
yeah, but the names sound the same way, they didn't change the name, the pronunciation of them.
Just the way-
Because like, my mom's, where she was born is Wilhelmsthal, and, I'll tell you what the Russian name is for it, Vasilyev. Now, that's what you think is different, but it says, it means the same thing. Well, shame on you, you were born there. Well, that's what it is, and when I was seven years old, I was a translator by the German army, and you wouldn't believe it, I spoke perfect Romanian. And then, like Richard said, you forget it, but I still, if I hear it for a while, I pick it up again.
What about documentation, since your birth certificate was lost? What did you do about documentation?
Well, the only thing that I have is that I have a piece of paper from the Lutheran Church of Bessarabia, who said that I was baptized on a certain date, and therefore I was born 6 weeks earlier, because everybody was baptized 6 weeks after they were born. So that was,
So you need to know that little bit.
it was phony to start with, but it was accepted. I just recently had a hard time getting Social Security straightened out, because they said, well, you got to go back to Romania and get your birth certificate. Those people wouldn't know who I am, because I was not registered in the Romanian register, and so there's really very little documentation, almost none.
Wouldn't your age be on the ship coming over?
Well, it's the same documentation. It's the church record. I mean, they had to take what we gave them, because there are no records.
I have a birth certificate, but it's in Russian. So when the first time when they seen it, they said, "What? We can't do nothing with that piece of paper. You got to have it translated."
At least you have it.
But we have one. I think we have a translation, but we still have the original.
You were born in Odessa.
Yeah, that's why it is. If in a city, it's different than. And the only way, because my name is Simon or Simone, because I was born when my grandfather was 60 years old, right on his birthday. So they said, well, might as well celebrate that too, and call him Simone.
But I think the point, and I am hoping that everyone feels the same way, the point is that these are Germans that left Germany under pretty harsh conditions, because they couldn't make a living in Germany. They left Germany to make a better living somewhere else, and kept the German culture, they kept the German language forever. And we need to do that. We need to keep on doing that. And I'm very disappointed that most schools don't teach German anymore. Why not? I think we have something to do with that, because we let it happen. They teach Spanish, they teach French, but they don't teach German. So there's something wrong with the way we
We lost the war. That's what's the problem. But we should be like the Japanese said, the general, when they asked him about, they said in an interview on the television, it says, "What do you say now because you lost the war?" He says, "Ma'am, who told you that?" He says, "Japan only lost the battle. We're winning the war now." And if you look at it, where's the economy of both of Germany and of Japan? Well, because that's why Japan had to have a war. If you read some of the books some of their people wrote, because they were overpopulated, they had nothing to live with anymore, so they had to bust out the seams and go out. So, the only thing I forgot to say before, when Richard mentioned about his grandfather being in the Tsar's guard, so was mine. And he has a mustache like me. I have his uniform and it stays all, and the Russians always went behind him and grabbed his mustache and says, just like my brother-in-law, he said, you know, because Kaiser Wilhelm from Germany was his brother-in-law. And that's funny, you know, his is from Bessarabia, mine was about 100 kilometers or so away, because they were both tall. I'm the shortest
And they were
one in my
German.
family.
He had German bodyguards.
What year was your grandfather born? He must have been the same age.
1876, mine. Yes?
Question for Richard, as the new president of Gold. Has this club ever considered the thought of travel back to, whether it's Australia or Germany or Czech Republic or wherever it is, for the sole purpose of collecting members and families of members here to go back and visit, connection, the region? It's easier now probably than it's ever been. Everybody wants to go to a different village, I understand that, but somehow, if critical mass is in this organization to do that and provide that for follow-on generations, probably never.
Well, as far as I know, Simon and I are the only ones, other than our relatives that are in this club, are from that region. I don't know of anyone else.
There is Sonia. Sonia's
Leon.
girlfriend.
Leon Witt's wife.
Leon Witt's wife comes from Odessa, or came from Odessa. So is Olean. She comes from Odessa.
I'm talking about many regions, whether it's Silesia or Odessa
Yeah.
or whatever it is, you can't do them all every
Well, that
every
one
year.
member, Olean's sister, she was already 6 times in Odessa. Her husband loves it so much because he said, I would go over every year.
But as Richard talks about second and third generation,
Yeah.
they don't know where they're from, they don't speak the language,
Well,
to go back and to touch and feel and see and smell it, good or bad, makes a connection.
my 2 sons know where their forefathers came from because my oldest one made a recording with my dad and mom talking. You should hear that. No, that wasn't like that. That's where we came from. No, you're absolutely wrong. You don't know where we were that time, you know. No? And then you start going, you know, who is right, who is wrong.
Don't you have
In my case,
Odessa?
I have no desire to go back because I don't associate myself with that. I do associate myself a lot more with Germany because that's where I spent my time. I was young and I just don't have the desire to do it. But as I said, many of these Bessarabs have gone year after year after year, and you know, there's no good hotels. You can't get water. Electricity is only 2 hours a day, and I don't know that I want to spend my vacation here.
Richard, let me be very clear. I appreciate both of your stories, but I'm not talking about you and Vesta Grieb or Simone specifically.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is the generational connection. If your positive memory is from some area in Germany, then for you personally, that may be the area that's important for your family.
Yeah.
But there are people following generations in this club. And my question was, has anyone ever in the organization here said, let's go to this region of Germany or Western Europe on a trip 18 months from now so people can go visit where they came from?
Trudy has answered.
We're planning a trip for next May, '08. And we're going to start out in Bremen and Bremerhaven and go to the new Emigration Museum. That's where we're going to start. It's a wonderful one. In fact, my friend in Bremen just went there to check it all out. I was there this summer, but I didn't have time to get to that. And he said, I didn't know that you were over here in 1933. He found me on there. I came over on the Bremen number 4 in 1933. But I was born here.
But I think the first thing we would have to do, a cultural committee, I guess, would be doing it, is to collect this data. I don't think we have that kind of data. Where did we come from? And I think that would be wonderful to find out where different people came from. You know, most Americans at least think that Bavaria is the only place in Germany, and I guess a lot of them came from Bavaria because, again, they were not the richest country at that point, and the poor people came. But I have no idea where most people come from in Germany, and I would be very much interested in finding out how many people are coming from Schlesien or from Preußen or from a particular city.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Richard and Simone very much, and then ask you, after we appreciate them, to come up and talk to them and point to the maps and look at Simone's maps, and let's do it on our feet kind of thing. Thank you very much.